All right. Hi, everyone, again. Just want to say we're going to get started here. This is Mike Streetz presentation, but first we are going to do some more CUGC trivia. And remember to put your answers in the chat box, not the Q&A. So you want to put that in the chat box. And again, that's just down at the bottom. There's a little widget that says chat. First answer is the winner. So let's get started. And the prize again is a CUGC cooler, that's pretty awesome. Okay, what Southwest National Park is the scene for Tatooine in Star Wars: A New Hope? Now let's give a little pause here for some answers. All right, I see some answers coming in. Some good guesses. I don't see the, thanks, Rob. I don't see the correct answer yet. Oh, the question, someone asked what the question. I see the correct answer now, but the question was what Southwest National Park is the scene for Tatooine in Star Wars: A New Hope? So I'm going to go, and the answer is Death Valley National Park. I love national parks, so that one's definitely on my list. And I didn't catch who the winner is. So I'll wait for Stephanie to announce that. Some good guesses, though, so really good. Okay, John F. was the winner. So you'll see a message from Stephanie B. and just send an email to Jennifer, and you'll be able to claim your prize. So we got another one, another Star Wars. What national park is the home of the Ewoks in Star Wars: Return of the Jedi? It's pretty cool. I didn't know this stuff. So. All right, I see the answer coming in, the right answer. All right, so it is Redwood National Park. Some good guesses, though. Okay, and it looks like LL is the winner. So Stephanie just dropped a message. You'll want to send an email to Jennifer Gibbons, and that's how you can claim your prize. So thanks for participating in that, everyone. That's pretty fun. Like I said, that was interesting news to me. So good to know those things. Just kind of fun facts you can share with other people. So we have Login VSI here, one of our sponsors, and that will be Blair Parkhill, who will be presenting.
Hey, thanks, Josh. I got my little bring your husky to work day guy right here. Today we're going to be presenting 5 things I've learned about WVD by testing it with Login Enterprise, which is one of our products that we have on the market today. So let me flip over to my screen share real quick so that you can see some of these points. And here we go. So one of the first of the 5 things that I was able to discover by testing with Login Enterprise was that session scaling is different from traditional bare metal RDSH. If you take some of the old scale sizing practices, you used to have the rule of 5 and 10. 10 sessions per CPU was our scaling standard. But with Windows Virtual Desktop and some of the performance testing that we've done with Login Enterprise, we found that the session-based rule of thumb now is about 2 or 3. And of course, that depends on the version instance that you use in Azure for your performance. But again, this is pretty drastically different from the bare metal days that we're used to. So that's one of the things that we learned, and we're going to go through this pretty quick since we only have about 5 minutes. Now, the second thing I learned was that logins consume significant CPU resources when using Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. Using a client-based OS versus a server-based OS certainly does a lot more to prepare the user environment for you prior to you opening up your applications and things like that for the first time. Things like app readiness, app registration, the Windows Store, things like that, all contribute to a high login period with respect to the CPU utilization. So it's something to be aware of as you're, again, factoring your sizing and scaling. And you can see some of the data that we have here that kind of typifies that. As you can see, these brief spikes during the login, and then it tends to normalize after it goes past that point. Point number 3 that we've learned is that performance can vary when it comes to the version 3 instances in Azure. This can be typically we're testing with the D series, the general purpose instance. And one thing that you might not know is that the hypervisor that underlies the virtual machine that you're on can be a machine with Haswell, Broadwell, Skylake, or Cascade Lake processors. And between reboots, it could change. And as I've seen in my testing, I have seen performance variance between, the same instance after reboots. And if you look at the data that I have here on the screen, CUGC, I did the first picture shows you what I got as soon as I had created the machine. It was based on a Haswell processor. After a few reboots, you can see it very quickly was now on Skylake, and the performance was definitely improved. So something to be aware of when you're using Azure and Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session to kind of base your sizing on. So be careful there with the V3s. Another thing that we've learned is 2004 performs better than version 1909 of Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. And of course, that's what we expect as Microsoft works to kind of improve through each iteration and release of Windows 10. You can see here during the testing that I did on a 4 vCPU instance, the NV4 ASV4, that 1909 produced about 16 sessions and 2004 produced about 20 sessions as we tested that. Now, you might notice there's another pattern there, and the bullet point number 5 of the things that I've learned when testing WVD with Login Enterprise is that optimization doesn't factor in as much as it used to in terms of the performance benefits that you get after optimizing a system. You can see here I got about the same number of sessions pre-optimized versus post-optimized. And this has a lot to do with what Microsoft has been doing with Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session in terms of optimizing the image before they push it out to Azure. So those are just 5 quick bullet points, things that I've learned when testing WVD with Login Enterprise. One more thing that I wanted to show you before I hand it back to our wonderful hosts is that to do this yourself, all you have to do is download our virtual appliance, push it into Zen Server, vSphere, Hyper-V, Azure, anything you want. You can set up a test, and after you set up that test, you're just basically going to give it the RDS host or the Windows Virtual Desktop, host pool. You can then tell it to display configuration accounts. It's just very simple stuff that you have to put in. And then you can put in a workflow. You just add applications that you want to have as a part of that workflow. And it will go through each of these applications and perform interactions within those applications, things like typing, sending emails, opening documents, saving, all of that good stuff. Well, once you have that set up, all you got to do is go back to Manage Test and click Start to run your test. It gives you a quick review. It will make sure that everything is well set and ready to go before it launches the test. And if it is, then that test is going to launch. And then we'll quickly go here where you can see that the machine that I'm testing with right now has a virtual user logging in to do its thing. So using Login Enterprise is super easy. If you're planning to do Windows Virtual Desktop in your environment, or if you're just testing Citrix virtual apps and desktops and you're concerned about scalability before and after doing any patches or updating Windows 10, certainly encourage you to do some of the performance testing as well. It's super easy to do and provides you with a ton of great feedback. So I hope that was beneficial and helpful for you. Again, only 5 minutes, so I didn't want to take up too much time. Thanks, CUCG, for giving me that little spot, and I'll hand it back to our wonderful host.
All right, thank you, Blair, and Login VSI. That's pretty cool. That's an appliance. I'll have to grab that and put that in my lab and mess with it. So now Mike Streetz, he will be presenting the top 10 optimizations. Quick word of warning, he hasn't cut his hair since January, so look out for that. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so Mike Streetz, top 10 optimizations, and you will find that in the, well, actually, no, that's this session here, so that should just be coming up right now. Sorry about that.
Hey, thanks, Josh. Thanks, Blair. I've actually worked with Blair on Login VSI installs before, so if you get the chance, definitely drop into his sponsor booth and have a chat. All right, who am I? I am a Citrix technology advocate. I'm a Citrix certified professional. I'm certified in cloud networking and virtualization. I'm soon to be a Citrix certified expert. I've been a consultant for the last 7 years or so. I'm now back into systems engineering and administration. And despite what the photo might say, I'm not actually Batman. Prior to the COVID hair, I got confused for Batman occasionally, but not anymore. Why should you listen to me for the next 40-something minutes? Well, probably less now. Because I used to deploy at least one new environment a month back when I was a consultant, so I've done a few of them. I've seen and fixed bugs that you guys wouldn't even believe. When I come across something obviously bad, I tend to optimize it. So that is the focus of this talk. What is optimization? So what I'm going to talk about in terms of optimization is optimizations, I think, that are most relevant to Citrix environments right now. And a lot of these are based on things that I commonly see or used to see in client environments that are suboptimal. So what does optimization mean? It means to get the best outcome obtainable under the conditions. So those conditions are going to be different for you than they are for me. Not every tip may be applicable. You might not be using some of the technologies that I use. So you're free to pick and choose which ones you want to apply and which ones will work for you. The next thing, what are we optimizing? In the end, everything comes down to user experience. So we're optimizing for user experience. If you decide to optimize for automation and you get it down to the point where you can deploy a new image in 5 minutes and you've got blazing fast storage and super fast optimization routines and you can push a button and you've got a new image out there, if it still takes people 90 seconds to log on, they're not going to care. So you're optimizing for the wrong thing. You need to be optimizing for user experience. This is my number one tip. It has optimize right in the name. Citrix Optimizer. What is Citrix Optimizer? So Citrix Optimizer is essentially a tool that you can download that uses templates which contain settings to turn optimizations on or off. It has all the single user and multi-user OS optimizations from Citrix in a single package. You can get custom templates from a template marketplace. One of the custom templates even allows you to brand storefront. So it's very powerful in what it can do. You can set up your own custom templates. If you have certain settings that you want to turn on and off that are different from what everyone else wants to do, you're free to create your own template and turn on and off whatever you want. So I could stop here, and this would be most people's top 10 optimizations you would achieve just by pushing a button with Citrix Optimizer. If you only take one thing away from this whole talk, it would be install this. But definitely check out the community template marketplace as well. Has the optimizer been updated for Win10 multi-session? That's a good question. I would check the community marketplace. I know it had been updated for the latest versions of Windows 10. But whether there's something in there for multi-session, I'm not sure. I know that the Windows 10 one that's out there doesn't break anything in multi-session. So that's about as much as I know on that one. I can ask, and I will tweet it out later today. I'll ask Martin. Other optimizations. VMware Optimizer. Should you use it? Probably not. It really depends. I mean, I don't use it anymore because all of the optimizations I need to do are in Citrix Optimizer. A lot of the templates that I was using for VMware Optimizer, the people that wrote them actually moved them over to Citrix Optimizer, so there's no need for me to run both. If you really want to be on the bleeding edge and get like maybe 5% more performance, you can run both. It's not worth the effort, and VMware Optimizer frequently breaks things like search and Apex apps, so you have to be really careful with it. If you just run the defaults for a Citrix environment, you will probably break something, so be warned. Any tips for Windows Store apps optimizations? Yeah, remove them. Tip number 2, FSlogix. Install it. It's good. What is it? FSlogix is a profile container, essentially. What it does is it redirects the profile into a VHD that then lives on the network, and it tricks Windows into thinking that it's local. It uses disk operations instead of multiple network file operations, which speeds things up. It's easier to administer than UPM or folder redirection. It's basically set and forget. It does use more disk than UPM. So if you're constrained on disk space, you're better off sticking with UPM, but disk is cheap. So I would say it's best for use with Windows 10. It's not as good for users that log into multiple places concurrently. That is where UPM really shines, and I would continue to use UPM for that, or combine the two with a combination of exclusions and redirections. FSlogix solves the search index roaming issues, except perhaps with Server 2019, which has its own search issues. I have a whole bunch of links if anyone's interested in search in 2019 to how to get it working. I can tweet those out. I'm going to actually update my blog with all of the references that are used in this. So if you're interested, you can check it out. It's a better user experience with Windows 10 and Office 365 through FSlogix, just capturing all of the cache files. You can deploy profile containers only for simplicity, and it will capture everything into the one VHD. I used to recommend that you could use profiles and Office containers to split it up so that you could reset like the Office container or blow away the profile container and you'd still have your Outlook stuff. But it adds complexity, and it's not really necessary. I mean, with UPM, it used to be the go-to to hit the reset profile button and it would solve everyone's issues. But it's come to the point where we don't really have to reset FSlogix profiles anymore unless something really, really bad happens. Profile corruption is not really a thing that we see. I've been running it now for the last 6 months. I've seen maybe 4 corrupted profiles out of a total of maybe 600 concurrent users. So it doesn't really happen. It's not really something to worry about. Download FSlogix. You can download it on that little link in purple. It's a bad link. Microsoft needs to change it. There really needs to be a page where you have every release version, the release date, the release notes, and a link to the version. I don't know why they can't do that. There seems to have been some crazy thing when FSlogix got taken over by Microsoft where the documentation just went nuts, like in terrible places. A lot of it's in forums, which you can see here, release notes as a forum post. It's not the best. They are changing it now, I've heard. So it's getting better, but it's certainly taken a while. Tip 3, BizIF. as I like to call it, or base image script framework. What is the base image script framework? It basically applies best practices for image sealing. So if you're running a non-persistent image with MCS or PBS, you need to seal that image before you push it out, ideally. There are certain things that you need to remove, like any individualizations that applications put in there, especially antivirus. It does depersonalization, clearing logs. You can rearm the operating system, rearm Office, clear DHCP info. It'll warn you if there are any pending reboots, which is good. You can get as complex or as simple as you want with it, really. If you want to run a defrag, which I recommend, you can clean out the MSIX folder. You can clean out .NET. It's really great. You can also get it to call Citrix Optimizer and have it optimize your template before you shut it down. You can set the options with GPO or through registry keys. It's really customizable. What is number 3 called again? BizIf, the base image script framework. You can grab it from eucweb.com. Tip number 4. All right, now this is going to get contentious. I have recently changed my mind on this before I sent these slides off. Get a GPU. It has its pros and cons. I've changed my mind on pushing this recommendation out as such because I've had so many issues in getting GPU working that I can't, in all honesty, recommend that everybody do it because it's a pain. You might already have a GPU in certain cases, though. So if you've got one, you may as well use it. If you've got the Intel Iris Pro, it works in a pinch. You're likely to have one if you've got an E3 processor, commonly found in HP blades, like the M710X. I haven't come across too many clients that have actually had an Intel Iris Pro, but if you're one of the ones that does, turn it on. You'll need to do a few things if you're running 715 LTSR, like there's an Intel driver package to get it running. I have the links to that I can send out afterwards. If you can't get one, add more RAM to the Zen Desktop VM virtual graphics card. I'm still using the term Zen Desktop and Zen App because I am old school like that. I refuse to use the new product naming. That's just me. You can call them whatever you want. Turn off enable GPU settings for apps if you don't have a GPU, because if it tries to use the software GPU, in a lot of cases, you're not going to have a good time. Older versions of Zen Desktop don't commit enough software GPU RAM for a 4K multi-monitor experience. So what you'll frequently see is if you're using the default settings and someone is trying to log in and they have, say, 2 4K monitors side by side, they'll start to get black screens. That's a sign that it's running out of video RAM because the screen has nothing to draw. If you get that, jump into your settings and change the ICA policies for server VDA, for workstation VDA, up the amount of video memory for the SVGA VMware card, or whichever one you happen to be using, depending on your hypervisor. Another option to stop running out of video memory issues, turn on browser redirection. It will lower the amount of RAM that's in use on the server end. So most endpoints are capable of handling browser redirection. So even most thin clients have a powerful enough processor to handle browser redirection, and in a lot of cases, the experience there will be better than trying to render the browser content on the server and then push it back over HDX. Not always, but in a lot of cases, it's better. It definitely takes the load off the server. And for things like streaming video, if your thin client or your endpoint can do hardware decode of the video, it's definitely going to be better. Tip number 5, CR or LTSR. Thanks to Nicholas Ignito at Citrix Guru for this image. It's CR. If you're running LTSR, I don't know what to tell you. The only reason you should be doing it is if one of your software vendors is saying you can't get support unless you're running LTSR. With the number of updates that have happened to LTSR, it's almost at parity in terms of how often you need to update it compared to CR. The issue there is that if you're going to be updating it that often, you may as well be on CR, because if you're stuck on LTSR, you are missing out on the performance benefits, and they can be as much as 20%. So imagine throwing away 20% of your server hardware and just saying, no, I'm not going to use that. That's essentially what you're doing by staying on LTSR when you don't need to be on it. There's been, I don't know, the 500 is the actual number, but it's close. There's 500 bug fixes or feature enhancements from 7.15 LTSR to CU6. If you're still on pre-CU1, why? Technically it's supported, but what's the first thing that Citrix is going to tell you to do when you call in for support? They're going to tell you to upgrade to CU6. If you don't need to be on LTSR, move to CR. That's my tip there. Tip number 6, fix your AD. I've got a pro speaker tip here too. Put the most controversial stuff in the middle of your talk, because people only remember the stuff that's at the start and the beginning, and at the end. Group policies. When's the last time you ordered your group policy settings? For me, it's frequently, because I inherited a group policy environment and there are settings there that I still don't understand. I'm like, why are we doing it this way? So I go through and do an audit on it at least once a month. If you've got logon scripts, get rid of them. Consolidate them into one if you can. Try to run them as PowerShell, maybe run them as a scheduled task instead of as a logon script. The more consolidation you can do with things like logon script, the faster your logons are going to be. And you can look at James Rankin and James Kinden's blogs for optimizations there around just getting that faster. But yeah, logon scripts are definitely one area where you can look to do optimization. If you can consolidate them all down to one, you're going to have a quicker logon. Drive and printer mappings will definitely slow things down. If you're at a point where you can get rid of drive mappings altogether, that's great. We managed to get rid of nearly all of our drive mappings by moving everything to OneDrive and SharePoint synchronization. So we no longer have drive mappings. We don't have printer mappings as such. We're using a third-party tool to handle all of that. If you're mapping printers through group policy and you're pointing to ancient printers because you haven't audited your settings and those printers don't exist, stuff's going to time out when you're logging in, and that's going to take a really long time. So this is my tip: fix your AD. As part of this, we've got sites and services, DNS, and DHCP. So let me quickly talk about sites and services, because this is something I see at a lot of clients. If you have a site set up where you've got an undefined subnet and it's not attached to a site, if you're creating like a new VDI environment, you haven't defined the subnet anywhere, you're creating machines in it. When people log into those machines, what domain controller are they logging in against? It's random. If your domain controller is in Tasmania, for example, and you're in Oslo, then latency is going to be bad. It's going to take a long time to pull down any files that you're trying to push to the machines through group policy. It's not going to be good. So a lot of the issues that I used to see as a consultant just come back to things timing out. So essentially, define your subnets, have it talk to the closest domain controller to the VDI environment. Don't just let it go off and talk to anything. The other tip, DNS. I'm not saying it's DNS, but it's nearly always DNS. A lot of issues with Citrix come down to things that's not being defined properly in DNS. you need to stop relying on host files. I know with Storefront and single FQDN and that kind of thing, it's handy to rely on host files because you're not really pointing to anything real. But yeah, what you really want to do is have everything defined in DNS so that the next person that's coming in can see what's going on. The other thing is DHCP. PBS and MCS rely on DHCP to be working. What I've seen in some environments has been crazy. Just IP scavenging not working at all, like setting your scope for the subnet way too small for the amount of machines that you're trying to add in there. If you don't have DHCP correct, you're going to run into a lot of issues. If you're trying to push 150 new machines into a machine catalog and you only have 50 spare IPs, it's not going to work. If your timeouts are set to some absurdly low number, like I've been in an environment where someone decided to set DHCP timeouts to 8 hours. What happens with DHCP is that it will try to grab a new lease at the halfway point of its timeout. So 8 hours is a workday, 4 hours is the middle of the workday. If it tries to grab a new lease during the middle of the workday, succeeds and changes its IP, guess what happens to all the connected sessions on that machine? You can't get back on. That's it. Like, and no one can work for the rest of the day. So that's my tip. Fix your DHCP. If you can, set your lease time to be unlimited. Otherwise, set it to something really, really long. Shorter lease times are not the answer if you're running out of DHCP leases. All right. So given that we're sort of the middle to tail end of the talk, I'm going to cram 3 tips into one. This is all we typically tune out anyway. So given no one's paying attention, it's a good time to do it. Machine creation services, turn on MCSIO. So what's MCSIO? It's basically the same thing that PBS used to have, RAM cache with overflow to disk. So what it's doing is it's taking all your writes, it's caching them in RAM until there's no more room in RAM, and then it's finally writing them to disk. With enough RAM cache, you don't actually need to write to the disk at all. So your disk latency there should drop down to something that's very low. Before we turned on MCSIO, what we were seeing with disk latency was spiking at around 30 milliseconds or so, which was leading to a very poor user experience. Once we turned it on, it doesn't really get above 2 or 3 milliseconds, and a lot of our complaints went away. The defaults for MCSIO will get you reasonable performance. If you have more RAM, throw more RAM at it. Your mileage may vary as to what that number is. I'm throwing 8 gigs of RAM at the MCSIO cache for server 2019 right now. And with 14 users per server, we're not seeing any disk writes to the VHDX file there at all. So that's obviously too much, but that's a number for you to play with. So RAM cache with overflow is the same as PBS. If you can, split your reads from your writes. You're essentially doing that by turning on MCSIO and splitting your writes off to RAM. But you also have the option to split them off to 2 completely different data stores. So if that's something that you're capable of configuring, and not everyone is. Some people might have one giant blob of storage for everything because they're running hyperconverged, and that's fine. If you turn on MCSIO and throw enough RAM at it, it's essentially never going to write to disk anyway. All right, this one's contentious. Defrag your drive. Yes, it's a virtual disk, but it still makes a difference. You can get a 30% reduction in write cache disk usage if your write cache is actually being used because it doesn't have endless amounts of RAM being thrown at it. It will be used less if it is defragged. You don't have to search around on the disk for areas to write to. If you're using PBS, don't defrag a version disk. Consolidate your disk instead. Consolidating is basically taking all your versions and collapsing them down into one VHD. What you can do with that VHD is then attach it through a Windows Server operating system and it'll show up as a drive, and then you can optimize it through there. So essentially, you don't need to boot the image. You can just defrag it as if it was another drive. And then once you're finished with that, unmount it, and it's good to go. Clean up your snapshots. So if you're using MCS and you have a huge snapshot chain, what happens during the deploy is that MCS needs to consolidate all of those snapshots. If you've got 20 snapshots in the chain that you need to consolidate, it will take forever to deploy your image updates. So you really don't need more than 3 snapshots in a chain. If you're thinking that you're going to go back to your base snapshot for anything with MCS, you're not in reality. You can keep a copy of your base image somewhere else offline. It doesn't need to be the original snapshot in the chain. If you have more than 10 snapshots, clone off to a new virtual machine, which will consolidate the snapshot chain and start again from there. It saves so much time. I mean, I had a client where they had 20 snapshots. Deployment went from, it was something like half an hour. Once we consolidated the snapshot chain, the image deployed in 10 minutes. So it's really worth doing if you have a lot of snapshots. All right, this takes me on to tip number 10, which is my last tip. I'm sort of speeding through these, but if you guys have questions, definitely throw them in the group chat. There's also going to be a round table if you think that any of the contentious issues that I've raised deserve further discussion. Clone off to a new VM versus just deleting old snaps. I would clone off to a new VM, but that's just me, because then you're consolidating everything. You don't have any snaps at all, and it's going to be even quicker. Fix your ADC NetScaler. I don't call it ADC, I call it NetScaler, but I got asked to put this in the slide. NetScalers, fix your routes. So for non-VPX, you need to start routing out your management interfaces. A lot of you are doing it. You don't know that you're doing it. Go in and bind your interfaces using VLANs, and you can stop doing it. Your management interfaces don't have hardware buffers. They can't do a gigabit per second. They will drop packets if you try to send all your traffic through them. I saw a client that was having endless issues with the NetScaler gateway. They couldn't figure out why. We eventually worked out that it was because everything was routing out the management interface. If you rely on Mac-based forwarding to make your NetScaler work, you should probably fix your routes instead. Mac-based forwarding isn't a magic button that just fixes your broken route tables. Like, you need to have good routing tables to begin with. Mac-based forwarding is good and bad. It masks a lot of what's wrong with your network when you turn it on. Essentially sort of sending things out the same interface that they came in on. Sometimes that's what you want, and sometimes it's definitely not what you want if you have specific ways that your traffic needs to be routed. My recommendation is to turn it off and to look at what's broken and fix it instead. You should really be using interface bindings. You can do it with NetScaler VLANs. That's my preferred method, just because it's the way that I learned how to do it. And it's pretty quick and easy, and it works. The issue with that is that it don't sync over H8. So you need to remember to set up your interface bindings on every node, essentially. There is another method to do it. You can bind snips to interfaces using dummy link load balancing V servers. And I have links in the appendix, which you can't see, but I will publish on my blog. That's basically it from me. I kind of sped through these, but I know we were running a little over time, so hopefully we're all good.
Thanks, Mike. Some really good tips there. That marketplace is pretty cool. I didn't know about that, so that was pretty interesting. So now we are going to wrap up with Jarian Gibson from Nutanix. It's a quick video.
Hello, my name is Jarian Gibson, Staff Solutions Architect and EUC Engineering at Nutanix. Today, I'm going to talk about Citrix and Nutanix. So let's talk about platform flexibility that empowers choice. With Citrix on Nutanix, you were able to pick any hypervisor that Citrix supports, along with both options for Citrix Cloud, Virtual Apps and Desktop Service, and Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops running on-prem. On the form factor, we have appliances or software only, so you can choose your options to what best fits your need. As long as server vendors go, we support a wide variety of different server vendors to help pick for the hardware choice that you have. And we have flexible configuration. You can mix different node types within the cluster, have GPUs, and easily mix different node types generations. For example, if you start off with our G6 nodes, you can mix in G7 nodes with no configuration. AHV will automatically see a different node generation, and your cluster is configured automatically. Let's talk about workload freedom of choice on Nutanix. Again, we support the hypervisors that are supported by Citrix Virtual Apps and the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. And again, on broker flexibility, you can choose to run the Citrix control plane in your data center or run their control plane as part of the Citrix Cloud Virtual Apps and Desktop Service. When it comes to provisioning, we support all the different types that both Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops and the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service on Citrix Cloud support, that being full clones, Citrix provisioning services, and machine creation services. Let's talk about user experience and linear scale. We always see issues when deploying Citrix workloads. When you start from day one, performance is great, but when you get to 6 months into the project, you might see that performance has issues. Maybe things weren't sized properly, things weren't thought about when you first deployed. That has changed over time. With Nutanix, we used to have the same performance when you start off with the minimum of 3 nodes as you would going to 16 nodes in the cluster and beyond. Again, with Nutanix, you should be getting the same performance day 1 that you get into day 180, 6 months, and so on into the project. Things like data locality and shadow clones even help things like machine creation services scale and shine on Nutanix. Let's talk about files. Every deployment for Citrix needs some kind of files, whether it's for profile management from the Citrix product, Microsoft FSlogix, Citrix user layers, Citrix user personalization layers, or other profile solutions. You need somewhere to store those. By using files, which every licensed cluster gets 1 terabyte free of storage, you can store the files for your profiles, home directories, departmental shares, and so on the same cluster that you would your workloads, using the same hardware instead of having to purchase additional hardware and work with different vendors. Using our same interface that we do for managing your cluster VMs, you can manage your file services deployment. With files on Nutanix, you can eliminate standalone NAS silos and have one single pane of glass management for your EUC solution. Now let's talk about hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. Today, everyone is looking at doing hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. Just recently announced here a few months ago, we launched Nutanix Clusters. With Nutanix Clusters, you can take the same software that you run in your data center and deploy that into the cloud. Our initial release will be supporting AWS, with Azure coming later. Think about things you need for DR, for bursting, for seasonal workloads, testing, even migrations. You can burst into the cloud easily with Nutanix Clusters and run your Citrix workloads there. We support the same plugins, the same integrations that you would as running AHV in your data centers. There's no change there. You can simply use our built-in protection capabilities to replicate your infrastructure to clusters in AWS and continue running your workloads. If you go out to the Nutanix blog, we do have a video showing clusters on AWS and bursting Citrix easily. So again, one portfolio, any app, any cloud. We support in your data center, public cloud, and being able to do a managed service with disaster recovery as well. So Nutanix and Citrix are better together. Look at things, the stack that you'll see from the delivery protocol, the secure remote access, desktop and app delivery, user profile management, delivered by Citrix, and then look at virtualization, server, storage, data protection, network security, delivered by Nutanix. So once again, you see Citrix and Nutanix are better together. Thank you.
Thanks again to Nutanix and Mike and Jarian from Nutanix. And we will be finishing up our technical presentations today with Scott Lane from Citrix, and he will share his expert knowledge on unified communications in HDX. To get there, just head to the CUGC lobby and click on Scott's session. Thanks, and I'll see you guys later.